Thank you for joining me for another quick hits conversation. I'm Dr. Robyn. With me today, I have Tim Hawks, Simon Coles, and Deidré Wallace. And I want to ask the question, how can an executive team identify and address absentee leadership in the work from home world? And Simon, I would love for you to kick us off.
So I guess the absentee leadership is a new term for me. Mm-hmm. And what would you see or hear that would tell you that absentee leadership was happening or not happening?
I feel like for me, that one thing of evidence of absentee leadership is employees complaining that their boss is not available.
And what specifically about working from home makes that identifying absentee leadership difficult or not?
I think that employees are unlikely to complain about their leadership to the next leader up generally. And I think it's less likely when they're on only scheduled meetings or they don't have access to you directly. My opinion. Tim, you were going to say something.
So yeah, I wonder whether a really good sort of synonym for absentee leadership would be a Teams meeting in which the leader has logged in, but their camera isn't on. So they're there, but they're not. And I think in terms of this whole discussion, understanding absentee leadership is going to be sort of the first step, isn't it? Is absentee leadership lack of physical presence, lack of mental presence, or lack of a leadership presence, or is it all three, or is it a bit of both? And I think for me, it's a bit of all of them, and it's not. And that's what makes this such a fascinating and complex subject. Is if somebody turns up and they're physically there, are they actually there?
So I think the thing you mentioned was people complaining. Mm-hmm. That their leader was absent, whatever term they might use for that. So, and then you can get into, well, the leader's not serving the needs of the people. So I guess the question is, how is that feedback mechanism? Mm-hmm. And is that lack of a feedback, or is that feedback mechanism affected by whether it's a work from home versus an in-place place? And
there's another side to this, of course, which is, if your leader is not present, that might be an advantage to you. Mm-hmm. So let's say, I work remotely, my boss works 200 miles away, and they're never there. I can't get hold of them. Well, I'll just keep my head down then. This works in my favor. So there's another dynamic there for an exec team within a business, which is it's all very well relying on the whistleblowers and the people I don't, but actually there's more to that. Is there a process or systemic way in which we can identify this absentee leadership? And I wonder, and I'm going to leave you hanging with this, I wonder where often we look for things for what's there and what's going wrong. In this case, should we be looking for what isn't there?
Deidré, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
For the business side, if people don't feel that they are heard, or that they are able to resolve conflict and so on, things are going to start falling apart. And so from the business and the leaders, they need to start acting pretty quickly. But as a lot of this has also to do with the fact that a lot of us are unable to actually ask for help. We find asking for help difficult. So maybe if we sense that somebody is distant, we might not be able to say, I need help, or in a way, are the other colleagues that I'm working with finding the same issue? And before we take it to our bosses is to check this out. But also we've just been through COVID. So COVID is also there as a mirror to stop us from brushing everything under the carpet, but also recognizing that a lot of our bosses may also have experienced stress. So in answer to what you were saying about the board meeting, and we need to start a new culture of not me and my needs, but a we situation more than ever before, where we recognize that there are needs, especially during COVID, that need to be recognized, looked for, and work together so that we can address these issues. But it also is an individual's need and responsibility to look at whether they are actually not projecting stuff onto their boss or to their company, that they actually have to look at themselves.
There's a lot of pressure listening to it. There's a lot of pressure on all stakeholders here, isn't there? There's sort of pressure on the absentee leader to, turn up. there's pressure on the team to identify this absentee. There's pressure on the rest of the team to discuss it. Then there's pressure on the exec team to know about it and understand it and take some action. And for me, with all that in mind, we need to go back to an organizational understanding of what absentee leadership really is, such that we can clearly identify it and therefore take action. So for me, I'm more interested in what is absentee leadership? How do I know it's happening? So, you know, if my boss is permanently sick, well, that's clearly absentee leadership, isn't it? Although maybe they're sick. It's a pressure there, isn't there? So maybe they're not sick, maybe they're trying it on. Is it for me to challenge that? Should I just leave it? But then if they are present, but they're just vacuous in their ability to lead, that's a whole different ballgame. And not only that, but you not being an expert in leadership, how do you know that their style isn't excellent? You know, their wonderful hands-off style is leaving me full of happiness and joy. And I think for me, it comes down to the term of the multiple definitions of absentee leadership and then identifying it.
And identifying it during COVID as well, because if your boss has actually got stuck in a situation where she or he has homeschooling and there's stress at home, it's also looking at, has your boss changed their behavior during COVID, or have they always been like that? In which case, that's another aspect to look at, is to maybe you need to find out what's going on in their lives rather than just wanting your needs to be met.
Yes, indeed. I mean, do you report the issue without finding out?
So I think
you start off by actually asking your colleagues whether they are experiencing the same.
So no, Simon, I would love to hear what you think.
That could be perceived as bitching. That is, I would say, dangerous. I think.
But how you do that, it's not what you do, it's how you say that. I'm experiencing this. Are you experiencing?
So the thing is, though, I don't want to have the conversation from the employee's point of view. I want to have the conversation from the point of view of the executive who has a leader that may or may not be unavailable.
So I think it's the meta question here is, you had tools for observing the organization, the health of the organization when everybody was in the office. We're now working remotely. You have different tools. How do you adjust your leadership style? And, you know, I think a lot of these executives who are demanding everyone coming back to the office are just having problems translating to the new world. And
yeah, I agree.
Much more fruitful conversation to think, right, what tools have you got? And there are tools. You can look at Slack. You can get metrics out of, you know, Zoom or Teams, and you could literally sit there and look at numbers and go, these numbers are some reflection of human behavior. What is it telling me? And you might be able to identify some problems there.
Yeah,
training's very important.
I think that the processing is the way out of this issue. This is the first one I've done like this, where actually for me the solution is a process. So a strategic over company process that looks and to seek for these types of things, if it's an issue for you, obviously. And gathering data that allows you to sort of say, yes, there's a possibility it's happening here, and then corroborating it with Deidré's thing about the employees discussing it and then coming back to you with, or you going and speaking to the stakeholders and saying, is there an issue here? But I do wonder whether for the exec team, which was specifically the question, this is about developing processes that gather data to give them information to allow them then to intervene.
Or just helping them translate their job. You know, I think, you know, it's how will they do it? It's just sitting down and going, your job has changed in a significant way that hasn't happened for 100 years. You know, we need to think about this. I think the other thing that's sort of slightly implicit in this is, what is the job of a leader if somebody's working from home? Their relationship with work has changed. They will be also in the home context where they're working. It might be that work is less involving for them. It might be that there's less leadership required because they've got other support mechanisms at home. Or it might be it's more because, as Deidré was saying, everyone's having nervous breakdowns in the four walls of their house, and your work colleagues are the only ones who might see you day to day, and you might need to reach out to each other personally. Don't know. Really interesting question.
I'm going to have to end our conversation there because that is our 10 minutes. So that'll have to be a topic for another day. I appreciate you showing up and not being absent from this conversation. I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.